Okay, so today we're focusing on factoring and solving. So we're going to factor first and then solve. So let's talk about our steps for factoring and solving. What do you think step 1 is going to be? GCF. You are going to check to find if there's a greatest common factor. That is step 1 always. Okay. If GCF works great, what do you then have to look at? Super X. So sometimes you'll be able to use the Super X, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll use GCF, sometimes you won't. When do we use the Super X? Right now. When are we allowed to use the Super X? Talked about it multiple times. When are you allowed to use the Super X? So you're going to use it every single time? No. What do you look for when you're using it? Go ahead, Connor.
Exponent higher than 2. Less.
So highest exponent is 2. If you have anything lower or higher than 2 as your highest exponent, you cannot use the Super X. So your highest exponent has to be 2 for the Super X. Once you've factored, our last step is going to be to solve. Set each factor equal to 0. So GCF is first. If you can simplify it using greatest common factor, fabulous. Then the Super X, if you can use it. The only time you can use the Super X is if your highest exponent is 2. As of right now, you'll learn that you can use it for other things later. And then we're going to solve by setting each factor equal to 0. Okay, so we're just combining 2 things we've already learned. You ready? We're tired this morning, apparently. Okay, so let's just jump into it. So I know that I need to solve this problem because it's set equal to 0. I need to know what x equals. And right now, the only way I know how to do that is to factor. So I have 4x squared plus 2x. Step 1 is to look for what? A GCF. Is there a greatest common factor between 4x squared and 2x? What? 2 and an x. So I can take out a 2 and I can take out an x. What's left over? So 4 divided by 2 is 2. I had 2 x's. I took 1 out, so I have 1 left. And then what happens when I take out everything? What's left? I can't just leave nothing there because then when I multiply it back in, that term goes away. So what do I have left if I take everything out? A 1. Because remember, if you distribute it back in, 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 1 is 2x. And that's still set equal to 0. Can I use the Super X? No, why not? The highest exponent is a 1. Okay, we're done factoring. We don't have to do anything else to this problem except solve it. And what do we do to solve? We're not distributing. You're not multiplying anything. Set each factor equal to 0. Okay, so you factor and then solve. If I want to solve this first one, I'm going to divide by 2. And what's 0 divided by 2? 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So x equals 0. What do I do to solve this one? Subtract 1. So 2x equals negative 1. Divide by 2. X equals negative 1/2. Okay, we are factoring and solving. Okay, I want you to start by factoring this problem. So we should be good at the factoring part. If you think you can factor and solve, great, but start by factoring. Figure out what you need to do to factor. Did you find a GCF? No? Okay, so step 2, if you can't do GCF, you're going to use a super X. So identify your A, your B, and your C. What goes on top? 10. So 1 times 10 gave you 10. On bottom, -7. And you have a 1x and a 1x. Two numbers that multiply to 10 and add to -7. -5 and -2. As I was walking around, most of us were able to factor. Then we need to take our terms here and write them in parentheses. So x minus 5 and x minus 2 equals 0. And some of you just kept on going, which is great. To solve, you're going to set each of those factors equal to 0. So x equals 5 and x equals 2. Any guesses on how I could check to make sure these answers worked? What if I want to know if I got these right? Anyone know how you can check to see if you got those right? You can plug it back into your original equation. So x equals 5, for instance. 5 squared minus 7 times 5 plus 10 equals 0. 5 squared is 25 minus 35 plus 10. 25 minus 35? -10. -10 plus 10 is 0. Does 0 equal 0? Okay, so you can check that you're factoring correctly by distributing or using the box, and then you can check if you solved it correctly by plugging it back in. There is no reason not to get the answers correct because you can check your work every step of the way. Okay. Let's look at one that maybe looks a little different from what we've seen. Let's try this one, and we're going to do it together. Okay, so x squared minus 49 equals 0. Okay, so if I look for GCF first, is there a GCF between x squared and a -49? No? So I'm going to go straight to the super X, right? What is my A? What's my A? 1. What's my B? My B is 0. Because if you remember, the general form is ax squared plus bx plus c. C is your constant term. B is the number in front of x. A is the number in front of x squared. Okay, so B in this case is 0. What is C? -49. Okay, so let's plug that stuff in. 1 times -49 is -49, and that goes on top. B, which is 0, goes on the bottom. And then I have a 1x and a 1x. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to -49 and add to 0. -7 and +7. -7 times 7 is -49. -7 plus 7 is 0. What do we do from there? Solve it. So we have to write it in factored form, right? So x minus 7 and x plus 7 equals 0. I should have moved up. I'm going to write it above because I messed up there. So x minus 7 equals 0. X plus 7 equals 0. What does x equal? 7 and -7. Do you see how we're just combining everything? Okay. So I'm going to give you, let's do one more together, and then I'm going to give you 2 to try, and then you get to work on your homework. So number 4, we'll do this one together. Step 1. GCF, do you have one? Between 3, 16, and 12? Does 3 go into 16? No. Okay, so there's no GCF. So we're going to go straight to my super X. What is A? 3. What is B? And C? Okay. So on top is 3 times negative 12, which is negative 36. On bottom is B, which is negative 16. And then I have 3x and 3x. So before you shout it out, I want everyone to get a chance to think of 2 numbers that multiply to negative 36 and add to negative 16. Can you think of 2 numbers that multiply to negative 36 and add to 16? Mario has it, Tyler has it, Zion has it, so a couple people have it. I'll give you another like 15 seconds to think about it. Don't think too hard. Tyler, what'd you come up with?
Negative 18 and 2.
Good. Negative 18 and 2. So remember, if you can't think of it, what do? You start at 36 and you divide by 2 and you keep working from there. Negative 18 times 2 is negative 36. Negative 18 plus 2 is negative 16. Does 3 and negative 18 reduce? By 3. So 3 goes into itself once. 3 goes into 18 6 times. Does 3 and 2 reduce? No. So you're left with x minus 6 and 3x plus 2. And that equals 0. We're going to take each of those factors individually and set them equal to 0. So here x equals 6. And what do you get when you solve for x here? Okay, so you subtract 2 and divide by 3, so you should have negative 2/3. If you need to write out those steps, do so. Okay. Okay, let's just see how if we do good on this one, then I won't give you the last one. So why don't you try 3x squared minus 27 equals 0. So I want everyone to try that, factor and solve. What's the greatest common factor between 3x squared and negative 27? 3. So I pull out a 3, and I'm left with x squared minus 9 equals 0. Okay. There's an x squared. So that should indicate to you that you're going to do the super x. What does a equal? 1. The number in front of x squared is 1. What does b equal? 0, because there is no x term. And c equals negative 9. So on top is 1 times negative 9, which is negative 9. On the bottom is 0. And I have a 1x and a 1x. I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to negative 9 and add to 0. 3 and negative 3. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. 3 minus 3 is 0. So I have the 3 on the outside, and then I have x plus 3, and x minus 3 equals 0. So if I'm setting my factors equal to 0, what gets set equal to 0? Okay, I can set 3 equal to 0, but what's going to happen there? I'm going to cross it out because it doesn't even make sense. 3 doesn't equal 0. So now I'm going to deal with, the x plus 3 equals 0, and the x minus 3 equals 0. So x equals negative 3, and x equals positive 3. So those of you that are still struggling, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you stay after school today to get additional help. I'm going to go through your quiz with you, kind of, just so you are aware of what's on it, because I want you to do well. So first of all, there's 16 questions. Okay? There's going to be some questions just like your warm-up today, where it's already factored for you and all you have to do is solve. Then there are going to be questions where all you are factoring is the GCF. And the directions literally say, factor the greatest common factor out. Okay? Then you have some problems where you're factoring completely, so using maybe GCF and the Super X, maybe just the Super X. And then you have a few problems where it's like what we did today. You have to factor and solve. Okay, if you can solve and you can factor, you should be able to bring both of those together. Tomorrow's a full length day, which is nice. So you have technically the entire period to do this. I'm hoping it won't take you that long, but you have that. Next week will be our test on all of this. We're going to talk about one more thing on Tuesday. Right now the test is Wednesday. I may push it to Thursday, but I don't know at this point. Okay? All right.